happens if Biden wins? What do you see? What are the tax laws? How will that change? What could happen? Just a little bit of looking and prognosticating, looking into the future past November. This is some we may have to have one after November too of one of these, but let's see what you've got looking 6 months out. Shannon, you got any ideas on that? Shannon, Timur, Carlos?
Wow, that one. Carlos, if you want to go first, go ahead. I have a lot of thoughts in my head, but.
Well, I was just going to say the TCJA expires in 25. So I don't think Congress is going to mess around with it until 25 because they're so disorganized. And
today we have three of the top experts in the tax preparation industry, people that have got decades, they don't look it, but decades of experience dealing with tax industry, helping people, helping your company. We have Circa's vice president, vice chairman, who will be chairman in a year or so, Shannon Bond. She's currently the vice president segment leader for Wolters Kluwer. Great experience, giving speeches all over the country to talk about what's happening, and she's here to provide it today. We have Carlos Lopez, president of the LatinoTaxPros. If you haven't been to some of his events, he had one in Las Vegas we went to last year. I think he had 2,000 or 3,000 people out there. And he spoke at one of our IRS events. We Circa hosted a panel, and I got to tell you, he had groupies. There were so many people around him afterwards talking. It was like a rock star there. And then my friend out on the West Coast, Taluy, CEO and president of ProTaxPro, FileYourTaxes.com. He has been a leader in the industry, whether it's Free File, Circa, all these. One of the smartest people you know, one of the best strategic thinkers.
Oh, come on, Tim.
You know, that was good. Isn't that just like you wrote it, Timur? Hey, and I don't know if you can see on here too, Vicki Hall, the deputy executive director of Circa. When things go right, it's usually because I listened to her and she did it right. When things go wrong, it's because I didn't do what she said. But actually, one of the smartest people, and she really keeps the ball rolling in all the events we go. So let's get rolling with this. I don't know if y'all want to take 30 seconds each to talk about the next week or so, and then we've got questions. And what I'd also encourage everybody, we've got some questions you sent in earlier, but we're also going to take questions. If you have some questions, send them, and we will try to call as many of them we have, call your name out, say thank you for doing it, and we will fire your questions to our experts here. So anyway, why don't we say Shannon is our vice chairman. Why don't you start? And then Timur and Carlos, give us 30 seconds if you want to talk about it. And then we've got some questions coming right at you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim. Well, what can you say about the next week other than the tax season that never ends for all of us? It's been certainly an exciting and tumultuous time navigating through the COVID pandemic, the tax law changes, stimulus payments, the PPP, and ad nauseum goes on and on. So hopefully we could share some thoughts with you today about what others are doing, how others are overcoming and working around some of the challenges they're facing coming into this deadline, and then how we start getting ready for next year. Thanks.
Yeah, and I was looking at the IRS statistics just this morning, and we're still down over 10% of tax returns at tax professionals, which means tax preparers are still looking at 10% of the tax filing volume that would normally be in their office to come in next week, right? So given the fact you have to have space in your office and you're using new technology that companies like Shannon's and mine are developing and pushing out to you to make the distance tax preparation possible, what to expect in the next week. Hopefully we can help talk to you, and even what to expect kind of going forward. I mean, next year is going to look different too, so we can tease into that too a little bit. So thanks for joining. And like Tim said, the best part of these presentations is the questions from the audience as we go. So if you do have questions, use your question and answer feature at the bottom of the Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, you can do it that way too. And we'll get those questions and feed them into Tim, and hopefully we can answer them for you.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for showing up for this meeting. And one of the things that we did at our commercial retail tax outlets is we're treating this like the second April 15th. So we called our clients, we texted our clients, we called back some of our receptionists and preparers. So we're on full blast. We're opening from 9 to 9. We're going to open Saturday and Sunday. We're going to be prepared for the onslaught because, like Timur said, we're behind a little over 10%. So I know there's still thousands and thousands of clients out there that haven't come in yet. They're scared to come in. Yesterday, we had a client that sat out in her car until we finished, and then we texted her, then she came back in to pick it up. So there's a lot of things that are different this year. There's a lot of changes that we're going to keep for next year, even if the pandemic is over. We learned a lot. We climbed some technology mountains. We climbed some personnel mountains. And now we're getting towards the peak of this. And we're looking forward to learning from it and repeating the good. Thanks.
Let me ask y'all, this is something that's come in, you know, and Carlos, you hit on it a little bit, and Timur and Shannon, do you need to, are you planning different staffing for next week? I mean, is it going to be so much that you think you're going to have to change your staffing, or what do you need to do to prepare for this last week?
Yeah, what we did, Tim, was we used our the last week of April staffing model. So we brought in the extra receptionist. We've asked all the preparers to modify their schedule so they can stay until 9 o'clock. And so that's what we did to make sure that that we can handle the flow.
Yeah, and you know, as a software developer, you know, we're out here trying to support tax preparers like you, Carlos, and we've gone into the same mode too. I mean, I just told all our employees, you know, fortunately we have a larger office space, so I was able to social distance all of our phone support people and get them into their own spaces. But I told them all, I said, between now and Wednesday, I said, I need everybody here every day. And you know, if you need to wear a mask, wear a mask, but we have the 6 feet of distance and all that stuff in our call center. So that's what we've done.
Yeah, so not unlike Carlos and Timur, at Wolters Kluwer, we moved everybody remote at the beginning of the pandemic over a 48-hour period, took the entire workforce, including our service excellence teams, our development teams, sales, you name it, in order to support all of you as our tax preparer nation. We mobilized everybody, got them all up and running. We have been running that way since then, since the beginning of March, and we'll continue working that way, obviously, through the deadline next week and on. But we have staffed up and they are all ready to go. All the protocols in place, the heightened monitoring, we're treating it just like they described. It's April 15 again. We're starting to see that ramp up take place now, right? Quite frankly, activity has continued to increase over the course of this week.
Well, let me ask you, since this last week, we had a lot of people. I know I saw some statistics. The IRS is approaching 6 or 7 million people filed the EIP, the economic impact payment, through that portal. But obviously those people, if they file that, they've got a problem filing again. How are y'all handling that? I mean, what do you tell them? Because obviously that's a lot of your clients and people that are coming in. They wanted that impact payment, and now they need to do their taxes, and it's an interesting issue. But how do you handle these individuals from a business perspective?
It's funny, actually. We just fielded a support call from one of our preparers, and that's exactly what happened. You know, they had a customer that wanted their impact payment, and they went to the IRS website, not knowing that registering that non-filer tool was actually filing a tax return for them. And so they got a duplicate error from the IRS saying that that social security number was already used on a tax return. And so we had to walk them through. I mean, the first thought is to file an amendment, right? A 1040X, which hopefully we'll e-file soon. That's a exciting thing we're going to be doing next month, hopefully. But the IRS had given us some guidance that what we should do is file that 1040 and put on the top of the 1040, what is it, amended EIP return? I mean, Shannon, I don't know if I remember what it said.
It was that kind of written at the top, yeah.
Yeah, and then that way the IRS would process it as an amended 1040 without the burden of that taxpayer going and doing the amendment. But I think you're going to see a lot of those come through in the next week or so.
Yeah, we're basically doing the same thing. We're filing an amended return. We're writing EIP payment on top of it, possible duplicate, and we're writing it in red ink to make sure that, because those all get processed manually. So we want to make sure that we notify the IRS employee who's pulling out the staple and setting that up on her desk, that this could be a possible duplicate. And that'll reduce some of the problems, hopefully.
I think it's a matter of productivity on the IRS side. I mean, they're doing everything they can, as we all are, to work in this environment during these strange times. But I think last estimate, they were in upwards of 10 million pieces of mail to get through. So certainly it's a difficult task in front of them. And I can't even imagine what 10 million pieces of mail actually looks like. That isn't it, the enormity of just getting through all of that paperwork is cumbersome. So them coming back and getting all these paper returns processed, certainly something we're all going to have to stay well aware of and stay informed and work with them on.
People understanding it's going to take a while? Are they accepting? Are they mad? You know, or how are they taking it?
Most of our clients are taking it quite well. We're explaining to them, you know, like Shannon just said, the IRS has 10 million pieces of mail they still have to open. And, you know, they furloughed their employees. So everything is behind and they're doing the best they can to catch up. And so we're explaining to them, hey, give it some time. We'll get through this mess. And they're taking it quite well, Tim. Yeah, I believe they are.
We've got, like I said, I want to encourage everybody, keep firing the questions in. We appreciate it. We've got one here coming in from Mark Stever down in Florida, I believe. And he has a question. Any idea if the 2020 EIP reconcilement on next year's tax return will be a form or a schedule?
Yes.
I mean, if you look at what they did back in, 2008? It was right on the 1040 with the worksheet and the instructions. So given the fact that they used the 2008 playbook to do the EIPs, I don't know, Shannon, Carlos, I'd see a line on the 1040 with a worksheet if I was guessing.
That's the best guess I could give you at this moment, but beyond that, I don't have.
Well, it'll be either a worksheet or a schedule.
Well, that's for sure. That's definitely
There we go.
Well, but the best part is when the taxpayers tell us how much they received. Because, right, if you had a child in 2019 or, you know, your income was higher or lower than those thresholds, well, guess what? Your payment was wrong. And so fortunately, you don't have to pay any payment back. If they sent you too much, unless you're dead, you don't have to pay it back. But if you're due more, right, you're going to have to reconcile it. And for the tax preparation community, unless the IRS builds us a tool where we can go ping the IRS and see how much they think they paid you, Shannon, we're going to either get rejected returns or we're going to get notices from the IRS after we file, and they're going to hold refunds. I mean, it's going to be a challenge.
That's another definite. There's no shortage of challenges.
Right. I think it'll be in the IRS best interest to have a tool or a portal on their website. How much stimulus did you receive? And let us know.
Okay. You know, Mark Stever's kind of a shy guy. He also asked if you had any update on the 1040X, which I think Timur and Shannon Carlos plays into the 10 million pieces of paper people that filed after the EIP. Any update on that?
Not on my end. What about you, Timur?
The date I've got on my calendar is August 17th for 1040X goes live. So I think there was a press release a couple of weeks ago. I think we talked about it, Carlos, too, right?
Yeah, we've talked about it extensively
on one of our earlier webinars. And yeah, August 17th, come tax software or not, we'll all be doing it.
Yeah, I know our development teams are heads down getting it done, working with IRS on the testing side, and then getting it launched. So we're all looking forward to it, that's for sure.
And let Vicki and I put a plug in here, you know, from the circuit perspective. And we've all been talking, and I know Shannon and Timur as board members with the IRS on this. The IRS has been asking for input. They are going to try to demonstrate it, but they've also asked us to provide input. So I know we've got a lot of circuit members on it and other members too, friends. If there's some questions about it, shoot it to us. Send it to circa@circa.org, and we'll try to get it to the IRS if there's a question about, you know, how that's working and what your thoughts are on that. We'll try to do that. We've got a question from Facebook here. What happens if Biden wins? What do you see? What are the tax laws? How will that change? What could happen? Just a little bit of looking and prognosticating, looking into the future past November. This is some we may have to have one after November 2 of one of these, but let's see what you've got looking 6 months out. Shannon, you got any ideas on that? Shannon, Timur, Carlos?
Wow, that would, Carlos, if you want to go first, go ahead. I have a lot of thoughts in my head, but.
Well, I was just going to say the TCJA expires in 25. So I don't think Congress is going to mess around with it until 25 because they're so disorganized and, right now, I think whoever wins next, our current tax system is going to be in place until 25. Go ahead, Shannon.
I think it's really predicated on who holds Congress. I mean, the president's going to certainly influence what goes on as far as tax legislation is concerned, but they still have this strong bipartisanship going on in both the House and the Senate, or primarily in the House. You're going to see little movement in trying to, if Republicans hold it, then they're going to have a difficult time repealing anything or making any massive changes to TCJA. We've still got massive work to be done on the Taxpayer First Act, so IRS is still getting those things done. I think they'll be reeling for several years coming out of this pandemic and just trying, I mean, again, 10 million pieces of mail doesn't get opened overnight. And we still have the budget concerns that IRS still doesn't continue to get funding to continue the modernization efforts. They get incremental, but we got a lot of holdover impact coming out of this situation, still impact on rolling out the Taxpayer First Act. And I kind of agree with Carlos on TCJ. I don't see a lot of movement going there unless we see a massive flip in the House.
I mean, I agree with both of you. I mean, I don't, everybody likes to say, what's the president's tax plan? But at the end of the day, Congress owns it. Even the TCJA that some people like to call Trump's tax plan, was built by a Republican Congress years and years before Trump was there. But the real risk I see, or opportunity, however you want to frame it, with Biden being president is, who becomes the Secretary of the Treasury? Who becomes CFPB, right? What impact does the Treasury Department and CFPB have on tax offices? If you look at what California is doing, right? And California is a bellwether for kind of socially progressive policies. You've got the California legislature considering a ruling that would mandate all California tax preparers disclose fees in a very specific way up front, notify people that may qualify for free file, that they're eligible for free file when you sit down in front of a tax preparer, tell them about VITA sites. So you've got like California here forcing tax return preparers, or contemplating doing this, to say, hey, you have all these other options besides me to file your tax return. And so the question that I would have is, if you do have a Biden presidency and you do have a shift in the Treasury Secretary and you do have a shift at the CFPB, are some of these rules that we're seeing in California and New York all of a sudden become national standards? And if so, how does that affect our industry? And I think that's the bigger possible change than a tax code change, kind of like you and Shannon, you and Carlos pointed out.
100% agree with you. It's the control of CFPB and where they direct that attention. Small dollar lending, does it come into play around a bank product scenario? Lots of variables that could be impacted there depending on how it's interpreted and who's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We'll get a question here. Kathy Pickering of H&R Block. Were you able to take advantage of any of the provisions that the IRS implemented to enable e-signatures? Right? Any observations on what worked and what didn't work?
So I'm a huge advocate for e-signature. Sorry, Carlos.
No, go ahead, Timur.
I mean, as we all know, on a 1040, you can sign your tax return by entering a 5-digit PIN number and your prior year adjusted gross income or PIN. The 8879s, right, that we use for individual tax filings, you just stylus pen it, or you do another e-signature type thing. It's really easy. The new e-signature guidelines kind of extended service for people that were in an audit. Like if you were in an audit and you had that personal relationship with your IRS auditor, they allowed you to do e-signatures between those things. I mean, Circa has been a big advocate of e-signature, finding a way to sign corporate returns, signing power of attorneys, all these things. I mean, the IRS needs to move forward in this area, especially when they have 10 million pieces of mail and sitting in a bunker outside the IRS building full of signatures, right? They could process these as e-signatures so much easier, so much more quickly, and drive. I mean, this is truly driving service to the taxpayer. It's not just making tax preparers' lives easier. Like the e-signature piece actually really drives direct benefit to the taxpayer and the American people. So I mean, I hope they do that, and I hope we as a community continue to encourage them and write to them under, you know, Taxpayer First Act and all their emergency provisions they have here under the pandemic to make sure they do it.
I think the continuation of all that from a taxpayer service perspective is critical, right? It's the way that this pandemic impacts people's behaviors going forward. Not something I'm not gonna predict from a social engagement perspective, but certainly people are recognizing the need and the ability to do things in a different way, to engage remotely and digitally. We certainly have invested quite a bit in remote tools and digital tools to keep tax preparers working and be able to engage, effectively engage, keep their businesses running, keep feeding their families, as well as keep serving the American taxpayer to get their return filed effectively. Digital signature is table stakes. It's got to happen. We need to continue to progress on solutions there. We're happy to have those tools available to our tax professionals today, and hope they continue to look at those in the future, making it simpler and simpler.
Shannon, playing off that, that's a good point. Playing off that, you know, you said you've enabled more of your employees to work remotely, and all of you there. Did you have to do anything on the security, cyber? Did you have to make special accommodations? And have y'all seen it? Part two, have y'all seen more fraud schemes pop up, or things that everybody in our audience might be need to be aware of?
So I can certainly give more of a larger corporate kind of perspective. We have about between 25 and 30% of our workforce globally working remotely, and we have telework programs and flexible work programs for most all of our employees. There are critical on-site folks, obviously, that we have enabled to be in the facilities just to keep things moving, open mail, move things, do the necessary things that keeping an office up to date requires. But for the most part, all of the technologies implemented throughout our systems have securities enabled, have VPN technologies installed so that people are able to securely connect to those things that are, you know, that require that private tunnel. In terms of outside of that, from a cybersecurity perspective, again, we have tools implemented that are rolled across our organization that help predict and prevent those kinds of attacks. But I can say that over the course of the pandemic and the move to work from home, we certainly have implemented more training, additional resources, more reminders than ever before in terms of what to look out for if you see a phish. We have ability to self-report a suspicious email, so not just to mark it as junk, but to submit it to our cyber team so that they can actually evaluate it and remove it from your mailbox and take it to that level. So take it to the next level rather for evaluation. So I would say definitely, I've seen it personally. I don't know if I'm sure others have as well. Those bad actors are looking for every way that they can to get into systems, to take personal data. And certainly in this pandemic, they've used the fact that everybody is working from remotely and might be working remote and might be a little more susceptible to propagating more of their schemes.
Carlos, you've got a big network there. Have you seen any more scams, or how have people been able to implement the work at home and remote working? Has it been seamless? Has it been a bumpy road?
Well, it wasn't seamless at first. It was like climbing a technology mountain, and then a personnel mountain, and then my own personal bias. You know, my whole career has been working in an office, having all my employees there, you know, watching everybody do their work, be available to them. And now we switch to this working at home. One thing that we're going to continue to do is having our daily meetings via Zoom. And having those meetings daily now for at least a half an hour has really helped us to communicate better with each other. So communication is our current goal. And so what we do is, in case someone suspects a scam, you know, we had a client receive a letter from the IRS saying she was being audited. Well, the envelope was hand written. On the inside, the letter had been whited out where the person's name was, and her name was written on top of it. And let me tell you, that looked like a scam. So we were able to call our stakeholder and ask him, hey, we're going to send you this letter. Can you let us know if this is a legitimate IRS employee? And yeah, within minutes, he called back and said, yes, it is. So if you communicate with your employees, like Shannon was talking about, make sure everybody understands we're looking out for this right now, because this is a golden opportunity for bad actors. Communicate with them, and as soon as you get something that you feel suspicious, go right to your stakeholder.
Timur, anything?
I mean, yeah, it's right. I mean, you have these EIP payments going out, and you have people trying to get in the middle of those EIP payments. We see, you know, calls coming in to our customer support staff. And to Shannon's point, we've had to do a lot more training and outbound reaching. And Carlos's point, the communicating, like getting the information out to the folks that are like on the front lines is critical. Even educating some of the preparers about some of the risks out there, you know, addresses being changed and so on and so forth. I think, yeah, I mean, this is the right time. Anytime there's a change, anytime there's any sort of like different way of doing things, you've got these bad actors trying to come in and disrupt how we're operating. So it is a time to be very vigilant and alert. And as we pass through this deadline next week, I think there's going to be a little bit of chaos again. And these folks are going to be poking and pushing into Shannon about this phishing. I mean, tax preparers are a target for phishing because we have our customers' data. And if someone gets a hold of our tax preparer's computer, they could possibly have access to some data. I mean, this is why I always pitch the concept of an online software. I mean, I know, Shannon, you guys offer an online software. We offer an online software. If you have an online software, you have a minimal amount of data on your computer. And where the taxpayer data is stored is you have, you know, experts monitoring the security and keeping it safe and secure. So if there is an incident on your computer, on your desktop, it's a way lower risk when you're using an online software. Obviously, desktop software has a lot of protections in there too, not to speak down to that. But I think that it's really important that we as taxpayers remain vigilant. Keep in mind we are a target, and do what we can to keep ourselves safe, listening to what your software company provides you as like a basic security protocols, and then also thinking about how you do that for the other pieces of your business.
You know, and I just want to encourage everybody, please keep sending questions in. Appreciate all the questions, comments, humor. Timur, you were talking about California, and somebody wrote in and said, Timur might be a little optimistic, assuming there's a California after this pandemic's over. I'm hopeful for California, Timur, for you and everybody out there.
Hey, we're locked down. It's you East Coast people who are going to fall off into the ocean this time.
We're next. There you go. Hey, we do have a question from Michelle Geraci down there in Florida, also at Jackson Hewitt, asking, any sense of another stimulus payment before the year's end? What's your thoughts on that? Is it coming? We've seen some stuff in the last couple of days, but how likely is it, or what do you think?
Yeah, I get out my
Doesn't ever end, Shannon. So
well, this is when I like to pull out the crystal ball, right? Seems like the indicators are, yeah, they're gonna try to push out another stimulus package, another set of payments to inject and to boost into the economy. That's what it looks like today. We won't know till they vote, until they put the package out there, but I think it seems likely there'll be more.
It is an election year, isn't it?
So they tell me.
I
hadn't noticed really, but yeah.
And they keep talking about maybe another $1 trillion, and they throw that number around pretty casually. But I've seen also the president, you know, everybody has their things they want. I think the president wants some sort of immunity for small business, which will be interesting. I know, Timur, you were talking to somebody's a congressional chief of staff, I believe, and about that, and about the immunity for business, which a lot of companies, you know, a lot of you guys not only are servicing customers, taxpayers, but you have employees. What did that congressional chief of staff say, and what's the thoughts on that?
So, I really wrote to him because you can see here I have kids. They decorated my home office for me. And the biggest thing to me is schools. We need to get our kids back into school. I'm sorry. I mean, school is in a lot of ways a small business. It's a district run locally. It's got a board of trustees. And I said, I wrote to him, I said, hey, we got to get the kids back in school. You have a child too. Two, we need to talk about the protections for small business. And, one of the comments he made back, which I thought was interesting and appropriate, is he said that, he has friends that work in places where they don't have any of these workplace protections. I mean, Carlos and I have talked about over the last couple of weeks on our previous webinars, the things we've done in our businesses to social distance our employees, to give them protections, whether it's masks or being able to take their temperature before work. We've done a lot of things. And he said, there's a lot of businesses that aren't doing things to protect their employees, that aren't making changes. And he said, how does Congress think about giving blanket protection and then allow people not to do things or coerce employees into working in unsafe conditions and so on and so forth. And, I get the point, but I think also, and he talked about a safe harbor. He talked about maybe if you do X, Y, and Z, then you have protections. But then the question is, who's going to decide if you did it right? And then you're back to the court, right? So, I was definitely an advocate of, some sort of protections for schools and small businesses, because I know for, the first day of school, every kid comes home sick and every parent's sick the first week of school. I get that the COVID is different than the flu, is different from a stomach bug, right? These are all different things, but the way it moves around our community is somewhat similar. And I think we need to be aware of that as people and think about the consequences to our kids and our economy. And I mean, obviously people's lives are important. I don't want to minimize that. I think it's extremely important, but our kids being able to socialize and develop, I think is so important.
Yeah, I agree with you, Timur. I think another stimulus payment would help somewhat, but getting the kids back to school is very important. Getting business back up and going again is very important. We need to focus on making our economy function again. And, we have, 38 million Americans on unemployment. The Arab Spring, do you remember that about 10 years ago? It was about the same thing. They had 38 million young Arabs that were unemployed, undereducated, and anarchy and chaos is what came out of that. And I just got a bad feeling that until we get things going again quickly, we could be in for a lot more chaos and a lot more violence.
Are y'all talking to small businesses? Are they worried about the liability? Are you hearing that? Or is this something that's coming down the road with, if there's a second round of virus? Like I said, you guys are not just tax preparers, you're businessmen and women.
Yeah, I had a client in yesterday who's really concerned about his PPP loan. His question was, well, since that covered my payroll, does that mean my payroll isn't deductible? And I go, that's exactly what it means. It means your payroll was paid for by the government. And he goes, that means it's going to be taxed, isn't it? And I go, well, depending on how your business did during these times, yeah, it's going to be a taxable amount of income for you. And so now people are starting to realize, well, maybe it sounded good, but in the long run, let's see how it plays out.
I got a question here from Joe Willits. Joe, thank you for writing. What do you think of the chances of this year's unemployment being all or partly non-taxable? Are you hearing anything, or what's your thoughts on that?
So again, I drive back to 2008. What happened back then? And if I remember correctly, we had a portion of your unemployment was non-taxable. So you had a little worksheet again, or if it was 2 lines in the 1040, I forget, but you report your total unemployment, and then the taxable portion was some lesser amount, which was super fun because some states decided to conform and allow you to exempt some of your unemployment income. Some states said all your unemployment's not taxable. Some states calculated in for like, I think Wisconsin's, homestead credit or something, still required the full unemployment amount to be calculated in for credit eligibilities and certain things like that. But if I was putting money on things, I'd say one of these stimulus bills causes some unemployment to be non-taxable. I don't know. What do you guys, Shannon?
Yeah,
Carlos, what do you think?
I think it's going to be partially taxable myself, because it is taxed on the federal side. Yeah, I think it's going to be partially taxed.
You don't think they'll make it non-taxable, the unemployment through one of these stimulus bills?
On a federal level or state level? I think you've got multiple angles to look at that. I kind of agree with Carlos. I think there's going to be, there's economic impact to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So just a complete wash of it, I think it'll be treated at a state by state level. The different states are going to be in different positions.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shannon.
We'll see.
States aren't back into session until January, so that might be a little late, but you're right, the federal might be a mix mash, Shannon, as you said there.
Yeah.
Hey, question here from Facebook, and again, please keep sending us your questions. We sure appreciate it. Any word on being able to amend the 1120S online?
No, we haven't heard anything like that. What about you, Timur?
No, I haven't heard that either. I thought e-file support, doesn't e-file support I don't know, 11 corporate amendment? I guess not.
I don't think it does. I think you have to mail those in.
A great question. Keep sending them in. You stumped the panel on that one. We'll try to get an answer and get that back out to Facebook at some point in the future. But ain't good one on that. Hey, y'all talked about the millions of backed up, millions of paper returns. Got a question here from again, Kat Pickering. Are you seeing a slowdown, or are the other returns coming in slower, especially things before March? Anything other than paper? Is the IRS processing things about the same, or is there seeing it a little slower than most days?
No, for our practice, our business, it seems to be the IRS did not miss a step. The refunds are coming in normally. Of course, they have their filters and their other ways of checking the refundable credits. But I think it's been working very smooth for us.
I had a client come in the other day with a notice from the IRS that they received on July 3rd, and it said your payment was due on June 1st. So clearly that notice had been developed, back in May, but didn't actually make it to a customer until July. So I think we're seeing the same thing, Carlos. E-file, it's never been a better time to talk about the fastest way to get your refund through e-file and direct deposit, right?
Yeah.
But the paper process, I think the paper process is hosed.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We sent in a couple of extensions. We mailed them in. For some reason, we couldn't e-file them. We kept getting rejected. Yeah, my clients both got penalty letters from the IRS saying that they filed after the due date. So we'll have to send those in. But yeah, paper, I think that's 10 million pieces of paper to process. E-file's the way to go.
I got a question. So we've talked about the money, everybody getting the checks back. If there's a second stimulus, what did we learn this year on delivering money back to people? What were the problems you saw coming from the IRS? Or were there problems there, the Bureau of Financial Services? What did we learn? And if we have to do it again, how did we fix it? Was there a learning curve? Was it just a learning curve, or did we fix it or figure it out at the end?
The biggest problem we saw were people who were non-filers because they're receiving Social Security, or they didn't file for 18 and 19, and they're wondering how they were going to get their stimulus checks. And one thing that we learned is to make sure that all of our clients understand, file a return 18 or 19 and get a bank account so you can have it directly deposited and not wait for a check in the mail. we've changed that procedure in our offices.
I'd say the lift that IRS did to get those payments out in the time they did, to have the accuracy that they did, was staggering. I mean, they pulled the data from Social Security, they pulled the data from VA, they pulled the data from the 18 and 19 tax returns. I think they did a fantastic job, honestly.
Yeah. Kudos to the IRS.
Huge, because they, as per normal, don't get the credit deserved to move mountains, and they were handed this and asked to turn it over in such an amazingly short period of time, with literally the largest distribution single time, right, to get it all out at such a critical moment for taxpayers, and heightened emotions. A lot of, were there learnings? Absolutely, there were learnings. Clearly, there were a few bumps with sending out the cards and people not understanding that these were official payments. And I'm sure, as all of you, as you work in the tax industry in any capacity, every friend that your parents have that have a problem with their tax situation, they call and ask you for advice. Like, to your e-file point, Carlos, my mom's friend filed on paper in May and she's still waiting. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you are. Like, okay. But the fact that the partnership, the collaboration with industry, I know there are many on this call and many listening that were on weekend calls, just knowing how hard everyone was trying to work to get this money out to people. Hopefully we can translate those learnings and they're able to take that information and make this next round, if should it happen, an easier process on them as well.
Keep sending us your questions. I got a lot more coming. Hey, Andy P is written in. And Andy said there's about 135 billion remaining in the PPP program. Congress extended the date into August. Have you heard why some of your small business people are not applying? Are they scared about the tax impacts, or is it something else? Why is there so much money left on the table? Why? What are you hearing?
Yeah, one of the things that we hear is, well, why should I take it? What are the strings attached? Do I really want some free money from the government? Is it free? And I just think there's a lot of unease, a lot of suspicion about this money. And, and I've told my clients that you're the ideal business to get one of these loans. And, we've done it. A lot of people have done them. I don't see any risk in it, but I just think it's just overall uneasiness, and then plus everything's kind of screwy right now. So, yeah.
I think it's the complexity, just like you said, that there's a lack of understanding. I would call this out as that opportunity for a lot of tax preparers. If you have small business clients or small businesses in your neighborhood, educate them, host a webinar, host not an in-person event probably, but do something virtually to walk through how you can benefit from taking this money. Your business is eligible because here's what debunk the myths around PPP, because they extended it because it ran out so fast first time around to get more funding. There are still businesses that need help helping get the word out and putting the truth out there of what this funding really can do for your business, your employees, is important. And people are I think they're suspect from a government perspective, and it's complicated. They're not sure how to go about doing it and how to sift through all the rules. And it's a real opportunity if you can get out there and identify those businesses in your area that could directly benefit from these funds.
You're so right, Shannon. The girl that cuts my hair, and I don't have much of it anymore, so her job gets easier every month I see her. But she's a Schedule C filer, right? She has got a Schedule C business. And she went to her bank, and the bank said, we're not processing Schedule C businesses. I'm like, what? Because I think maybe she doesn't have a business checking account or something. She runs it through the wrong type of checking account, which who knew, right? And so I told her, I was like, well, there's other services out there. You search the internet for PPP loan, and I think PayPal's running them. I think Intuit was running it. I think. There's a bunch of folks that we all know and trust in our industry that are actually running these things. There's credit unions that are in your community that run it. So to your point, Shannon, do a webinar, debunk the myths, let people know that there's options out there, even if their bank said no. Because if the big bank said, no, we don't want to do it because that's not in our pipeline or whatever reasoning they had. There's sources out there, and it's a meaningful chunk of change for people. It's, take your business income and divide it by 6. It's basically what you're eligible to, help support you through the pandemic.
Yeah, and I would, I just, if any of you are looking, we have a lot of information, free webinars, free informational seminars about PPP and other regulatory opportunities. But you can find them on our LinkedIn and the Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting LinkedIn page. There are a number of them if you're just looking for more information on how you can go and help, and they're free.
It's really
Shannon,
something.
you guys see this as an opportunity to help your customers, your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Tim, absolutely. I mean, it's our job to help tax professionals help people in a financial crisis. And we're not trying to leverage, we're trying to put the information out there in a way that you can translate it. Like, it's scary times for folks, and they're already, who wants to apply for a mortgage, right? So you're now thinking about, I'm working remote, my kids are are all over all the time. My spouse and I are learning how to work from home together and share a space. I mean, I've got a garage door guy out there right now, and my dog's barking over here, and and then you think about, oh, the government's giving away free money. Yeah, right, I'm sure, like, I'm gonna qualify. That's sort of the sentiment. If we can't help people, tax preparers, figure out ways to be helpful in their communities, a lot of, and then those that are out there, a lot of these guys are part of their community's circle to help people through financial times. So these loans are there, and we need to help people take advantage of them. We need to help tax professionals stay in business and find other ways, other sources of income, and becoming more consultant advisors to folks who maybe don't traditionally look for a financial advisor. Now is the time to think about broadening that service and giving that extra level of commitment to your community.
I mean, one of the questions actually, Tim, that was submitted early.
And you talk about the garage door guy and the dog. Yeah, I had 4 kids zooming at once this year. I had to go out in the garage with the cats.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, I've got one, and everybody's been sending them in, and the questions are coming in through Zoom. They're coming in through Facebook, but we also, some people that have got our cell phones are texting Vicki and I directly. Joe Sika, Circa board member, I hope he's not watching this on his phone because he says he's driving, but I hope it's his wife that texted this in, said it's a question about the role of preparers in helping with the taxpayer's financial health. For instance, as refunds are taking longer, do bank products provide at least some choice to certain taxpayers who may be limited in certain more mainstream financial services? Rules getting the money back to people, do some of these other, does the IRS need to keep in touch with making sure these products are economical and efficient? Thank you, Joe. Like I said, I hope that was your wife texting and not you doing it while you were driving, but thank you.
I mean, the underlying thing is, I grew up in a town called Oxnard in California. Our primary industry in Oxnard is agriculture, kind of like you, Carlos, up in Salinas.
Yeah.
And you look at the bank account rates of your taxpayers. At one point, my dad had a tax business. This is how we actually got into this business. My dad did taxes and all of the other things he did. And he was in the fisherman marketplace. Like he did taxes for like 3 or 4 fishing boats in our community. And Carlos, you and Shannon heard the story when we talked about tax forms. But you know how fishermen pay you? They pay you in fish, right? You did my taxes, here's some fish. And you think they have proper bank accounts and they have the ability to access services? But they're small business owners, so they probably have a lot more access than your person out there picking strawberries or picking tomatoes or harvesting peppers. I mean, a lot of times the bank account that some of these people in our community have is the debit card they got when they got a job. And I serve on the board of a local credit union, and one of my passions in the credit union board is to actually get more bank accounts to those folks that traditionally don't have mainstream banking services. And so to Joe's question, I think is really appropriate because there are so many Americans that don't have full service bank accounts that you and I just take for granted, right? If they wanted to get their tax refund, they're looking at a check mailed to them from the IRS right now. They need to go into a financial institution, have physical contact with someone to actually cash that check. And then they walk out with a big wad of cash in their pocket. They're a target for a criminal. So you ask the question, where do the bank products play and where the bank products actually support American taxpayers? I really think for the underbanked or unbanked taxpayer, it provides a lot. And it's a service that facilitates getting money in their hands that they can spend, they can feed their families, they can pay their rent, basic needs. They can meet them more quickly when that money is delivered to them electronically. And that might be the only option.
People forget how many people don't have a checking account, don't have traditional banking, don't they? And Carlos?
Yeah, the biggest fear that we see from our clients who insist on receiving a check is, what if one day this bank card's supposed to have $800 on it? I go to use it and they tell me there's nothing on this card. Then who am I supposed to call? Where do I go to get my $800 back? Because yesterday I had 800 on it and today you're telling me I have 0. So the biggest challenge we have in serving the underbanked or the non-banked is, how do we mitigate that fear of losing their money to the unknown? That's the big challenge that we see.
I agree with you, Carlos. I think that a lot of times you focus on trying to get them into a mainstream banking solution. So we look for ways to, and maybe they don't want that. That's not how they do business. They're not like the fishermen who are going to keep paying people in fish, and might go with a hybrid of something, but they're not fully going to put, to your point, Carlos, all those dollars in any one basket, because what if somebody empties that basket? I don't have a physical place to go and get it. They feel like it's not under their control or their purview, which is what we hear a lot. I think that the other opportunity with some of the financial products we have available to customers is just the opportunity to serve the customer without having to have the in-person engagement that's so typical in our, in this segment of the market. It's a lot of face-to-face. The transactions occur across the desk. And so if you're suddenly not doing that, we found a lot of preparers going into the work from home environment. They weren't taking credit cards. They weren't taking, because everything was happening in the office. And so they had to find alternative ways. And that was another opportunity to sort of say, there are other ways you can get paid from some of these. You can still collect your tax preparation fee, and you can provide a secure transaction for the taxpayer to receive their funds if they don't have that ability. So I think it's twofold, and it's a great question, Joe.
Something we learned this year that I really hadn't thought of, and Timur, I think you had mentioned, what was it, 08, the last time we had a stimulus like this, and we were talking to the IRS and BFS. One thing, they don't have the ability to print as many checks as they did a decade or more ago. And, even if they wanted to print 10 million or 20 million checks in a hurry, they said they didn't have the paper, the ability that they had, in 2008. So it sounds like we really need direct deposit, electronic banking, and also these bank product cards, because they provide some redundancy to make sure people get their money, various venues for folks to get their money, and get it in a timely manner. Because if you're waiting for a check, it may take a while. The IRS, I even heard they said it'll take us a while to order that much paper to print the checks, which I was kind of surprised at. So learn something every day here.
Yeah, there's a lot more behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Hey, Vicki, you want to announce, don't we have another event, one of these coming up? You want to give us an announcement on that?
Vicki, you're muted.
Can't hear you.
You're on mute, Vicki.
There we go. Hi, everybody. We do have another webinar scheduled. We'll be taking questions right up to the 2 o'clock hour, which gives us a couple of more minutes. But the next webinar is going to be scheduled for Thursday, July 30th, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. Of course, we'll be sending out announcements on that. Same bat time, same bat channel. And the topic for that one will be economic impact payments 2020 review, lessons learned. And for that, we have scheduled Kathy Pickering, our past chair, circuit chair, who is the chief tax officer for H&R Block, and Joe Sika, another circuit board member, current secretary, who is the Chief Public Policy Officer for Green Dot. So mark that on your calendar. We'll be sending out announcements. But Tim, I think we have time for a couple of more questions.
Yeah, and I just want to say something too, is Circa Executive Director. And we've got a couple board members on here. We've got one of our newer members, Carlos, on here, and thank you all. If you've got a topic that you think would be good for everybody to hear, the industry to hear, call us. I think we'd like to have you maybe be on one of these panels. You don't have to be a board member. You just got to be interesting and not shy, willing to get out here and talk for an hour about things that make sure everybody can hear it. Because what we're trying to do at Circa is make sure you have the information that you need to service the taxpayers and help your business grow. So we'd like to continue that and make sure we're moving along on that. Let me ask, there's a question here, and Timur, I don't know if you want to, what kind of evidence do you keep? People are asking with audits coming, are there going to be more audits? I don't know, but you have to keep a lot of, what do you keep for an audit for the EIC or any of these others?
When somebody asks me that question, I usually tell them about Carlos Lopez and Latino Tax Professionals, because they've got a packet of information that tells you what to do. I'm sure Wolters Kluwer is the same thing, Shannon. But the basic thing I tell people, and then I'll let Carlos and Shannon give the actual real advice, is when you fill out that EITC credit due diligence form as the 8867, and you say on there, I've got school records to prove that the child lived with the parent, or I saw a profit and loss statement for a business, and that's how I did a Schedule C. Make sure you have the school record and make sure you have the profit and loss. Because if someone walks in your office, like the IRS does, two guys in a gun with a gun, and they say, hey, we're here to do an EITC due diligence audit. Here's Timur Taluy's tax return. You said you knew his kids lived with him because you have a school certificate. Let me see it. And you say, Hamda, I think you're in a real challenge to prove that you did your job. And so what we do within our software is we have the ability for you to text yourself a link and securely upload that document using your phone. Or if you have a scanner in your office, you can scan, upload it, and actually store that document electronically with the tax return. So whatever you tell the IRS you have, you actually can have. And so that's my advice to tell people. But I'm sure Shannon, you and Carlos actually have better guides and some colloquial advice and a story about two guys and a gun. But
not tend to share stories as two guys and a gun, but so one of the features we have in our tax-wise product is a vault scenario where, so in our online, you're able to do exactly as you described, Tim, or just take a picture of the documentation and it stores alongside that tax return right there in the vault. Doesn't stay on your phone, just goes right in. You can also use a remote scanner or other camera tool that you have. So various ways to do that without having to go outside of the tax return process itself. It's just seamless. But then obviously your advice is great. You say you have it, you better have it. I've seen some interesting practices out in some of our offices where they're putting up signs that say, I'm not being nosy. I really have to ask these questions, and don't be surprised if I ask you to go back and provide X, Y, or Z in order to prove the EITC claim, and explaining very as best they can. Like, I can be fined if I don't ask these questions. And I think it's very clever how a lot of offices are implementing what are kind of probing questions and people have gotten used to them now as this has been in place for a while, but it's an interesting dynamic as to how they communicate that to their clients.
Yeah, clients aren't used to walking in to get their taxes prepared, having their school records, medical records, current medical records to their tax pro. So one of the ways we handle it is, look, every year we're updating our information on you. And it's not that we're unnecessarily probing about your personal life, but one thing that we do need to do is establish the residency of your dependent that's giving you these refundable credits. And it's very important because someone else may be trying to do the same thing, and we want to avoid IRS letters just like you do. So, explain what the IRS wants, and then your client will either comply with you, or they'll take off and go somewhere else, which is okay with us.
Guys, we've got one last question, and this is my favorite question, and I'm going to answer it because somebody wrote in from Facebook, said, what is CIRCA? And CIRCA is the Council for Electronic Revenue Communication Advancement. And what we are is try to be the voice of the tax preparation industry. You see two of our board members here, our leadership, Timur and Shannon. Shannon, like I said, will be the next chairman in a year or so. We've got members, we've got almost 50 members of CIRCA right now. And we meet with Vicki and I and the board members, meet with the IRS regularly. Not that the IRS takes our advice all the time, but they listen. And they listen to ideas that come from you. We get the membership will write us in, and we will take these issues and take them to the IRS and say, this is what people are saying. This is something you need to think about. And we work with the industry, and we work with the IRS. We work with government, whether it's BFS or Treasury, to make sure that the taxpayer is serviced well and the taxpayer is taken care of and gets their money and gets to file easily, and that your businesses are taken care of. So if you have any questions, please contact Vicki or I at circa.org, and that's CERCA at circa.org. And if you just want to look up the website, it's CERCA.org. Again, Vicki, thank you. I think Vicki announced that we'll have another one of these on the 30th of the month. And we'd like to get back together with you. And if you have any other questions, if you would like to be a panelist on here, if you've got an interesting topic that's something you want to hear about, please let us know. Again, thanks for all you do. Carlos, Shannon, Timur, great hour, great afternoon. And we look forward to hearing from all of you and working with you. Thank the three of you for your leadership. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.